Number 5 on this list is the Hoher Market. Hoher Market is directly in the center of Vienna in Austria and is quite beautiful today. It has fancy supermarkets, boutique cafes, and high-profile stores for people to window shop and explore. Therefore, it's definitely a solid tourist attraction, but it may not be the best spot to go visit after you hear some of the things that happened here in the past. This market for over 500 years was where the state-sanctioned executions would take place. 500 years of people being killed off has resulted in thousands of deaths piling up over those said years. The manner to how these people were killed has changed and morphed over the years as well too. Most were hangings, but some were quarterings, which is a process where someone gets chopped up into tiny little pieces. Yeah, it's pretty graphic. Because of this, there have been many reports of hauntings in this market. Apparitions of people dressed in clothes dating back to the 14th century have shown themselves to people before. One report has someone detailing an instance that they turned a corner and swore they saw a dead corpse right in front of them. When they returned to the location with another person though, there was no sign of it at all. Other people have sworn that they've seen the ghost of an executioner here before, standing and waiting to hang someone. I honestly think that going to this market would be okay, but if I was to go, then I'd much rather go in the daytime. Probably not the spot you want to be walking around at nighttime with the ghosts of the executed. Number 4 on this list is Citadel. 6. I hope I pronounced that right, but I kinda highly doubt it. Either way, this is a building in Vienna that you shouldn't want to stay in at all. It all started when a woman tried to murder her husband. Not the best way to start a story, but here we are. The woman who lived in this building tried to poison her husband, but on the same night she meant to do it, actually died herself. Now, her spirit still resides at this place and haunts the people who stay here. Visitors of this building say that they'll see this ghostly apparition sitting in a wooden rocking chair and swaying back and forth, looking as eerie as ever. Apparently this wooden chair also emits electromagnetic rays. Why it does this or from where this legend came from is currently unknown. This woman also isn't alone in her haunting of this place either. She was said to have a very pretty white cat, and this ghost kitty still sticks by her. The cat wanders the halls and can appear and disappear as it chooses. It's said that if someone looks at it, then mischief will find them and cause them major problems in their life. I should also note that this building isn't even that nice to begin with. Like, at least the market I could get a nice coffee or something, but best case scenario here is that I get bothered with rats, whereas the worst case scenario is I get murdered by some ghost woman. Not the spot that I recommend you stay at if you're heading to Vienna.
In at number 3 we have Salem Mansion. The Salem Mansion is a dark, mysterious and eerie abandoned mansion located in Thessaloniki. The villa was designed in 1878 by Xenophon Paeonides, who was known to be the most famous Greek architect in Thessaloniki. The mansion was bought in 1894 by Emanuel Salem, who was the most important lawyer in the city and an eminent member of the Jewish community. It remained in the family for over 20 years, and the family gave its famous name the Salem Mansion. During World War I, the villa had changed hands after the Salem family left in 1915, and it became the consulate of the Austro-Hungarian Empire for more than half a century. In 1978, the mansion was damaged extensively by an earthquake that devastated Thessaloniki. To this day, the house still belongs to the Italian state but remains deserted. There have been many plans to restore the villa, but for some reason it has yet to be done. This mansion is a very mysterious place, and even just looking at it you can sense the fear and horror. There are many legends about the place, and many paranormal investigators visit this infamous place to try and communicate with whatever horrific beings haunt the mansion. Many people speak of when they have visited the place, that they felt cold air around them, even in the middle of summer, hearing doors close out of nowhere and hearing steps all throughout the house. Locals have mentioned that they stay away from this sinister house due to all the stories and sightings that have happened here. Many think it's cursed and stay as far away as they can. In 2013, the producers of the hit TV show American Horror Story used a photo of the Salem Mansion for one of the posters promoting the new season because of its haunting appearance. None of the people working on the series ever mentioned the home being in Greece, and the series of the show, Coven, revolves around a group of witches and is set in New Orleans, so many believe this house is located in the United States. If you're brave enough to visit the Salem Mansion, you have to go all the way to Greece. In at number 2 we have Christos Mansion. The Christos Mansion was built in 1900 for Nicholas Christos, who was the Russian consul for Greece and lived there with his wife and 4 children. The mansion is located beside the ocean in the small village of Ano Lahonia Pelion. Nicholas was one of the most powerful men in central Greece at the time and was widely known in the Pharsala area, and they owned homes in other places like Volos and Athens. The popular urban legend that surrounds the house is that it's haunted after the death of the Christos family, who was supposedly poisoned by a dead lizard that had fallen into a jug of milk. It was later later found out that the children in the family died in their early teens of tuberculosis, but the urban legend is reinforced by the funerary monument in the cemetery of Bolos, which presents a table with a decanter and 3 chairs around it, each inscribed with each name of the children and the age they passed, but they all said they all died at a very young age. No one really knows the truth, so the rumors of this cursed mansion continue to this day. Another legend believes that many war soldiers also haunt the mansion. During World War II, the mansion was occupied by the Nazis, who used it as headquarters where Greek warriors were interrogated and tortured. There were many Greeks who were tortured and executed in the villa's basement. This mysterious mansion has many different stories, and these are reinforced because many other families who lived in the mansion after the Contos fell into a lot of misfortune, as well as people who worked on the home. Many of the past owners reported hearing spine-chilling screams and cries, causing none of them to stay too long. Some of the workers who helped renovate the villa never saw end results, as many of them unexpectedly died before finishing. Many locals tend to stay away from the haunted mansion, but many tourists come to experience the haunting for themselves. But this mansion is one of many in Greece that have multiple ghost sightings inside and is truly terrifying. To this day, the Christos Mansion stands empty and abandoned, which makes this place even scarier. And finally, in at number 1 we have Villa Cagis. The Villa Cagis is located in the Rafina area of Attica, which was owned by Pericles Cagis, who was a very wealthy but disturbed man. The villa was named after him, and he stayed in the large mansion with his wife and family. The legend says that in 1910 Pericles took the life of his wife before taking his own life, and some versions tell the story of him taking the life of his whole family before taking his own life in the family home. So there are many stories of Pericles and his family haunting the home, and many have seen family members running around the home and hearing mysterious footsteps. During World War II, the home had been taken over by who used it to imprison and torture Greeks in the cellar, who many believe haunt the cellar to this day. Years later, while attempting to demolish the home, the bulldozer being used suddenly stopped working while approaching the house, and after 2 of the workers died from sudden heart attacks, all thoughts of knocking down the home were abandoned. Another popular legend regarding the haunted mansion is that Anau accepted a bet from his friend that he couldn't last a night in the famous haunted house. Well, he did last the night, but when his friend came in the morning to check on his friend, he found him dead in the home. It's said that nothing at all is able to grow for a few meters around the building. Experts who have investigated this phenomenon found that the atmosphere surrounding the house is uncommonly high in negative ions, something that is thought to be linked to paranormal activity. This haunted villa is among one of the most haunted in all of Greece and should be avoided.
Number 5 on this list is Cle Caro. This is a beautiful casa in Tenor life, and there is a ghost that haunts it consistently. Idealista says, the origins of this scary story are related to the old house of the Cle Caro family, which is located in Caladin San Augustin and dates back to the late 16th century. Catalina lived in this building. Many believe that this girl was the daughter of Antonio Cle Caro, and that she was forced to marry an elderly man, and for this reason the young woman decided to take her own life by throwing herself into a well at the back of the house, an area which is now closed with a wall. Legend has it that Catalina's body is buried in one of the rooms within the house and haunts the property to this day. This is due to the fact that because she took her own life, the church denied giving her a Christian burial in a cemetery. This lack of a proper burial is probably leading to the fact that her ghost can't rest. As we've seen before on this channel countless times, people who get cast away like that, regardless of their circumstances, their spirit often clings to the living. I doubt that they can help this in any way, it's just kind of the way things like this operate. It also doesn't help getting your body literally stuffed into the walls of your building, and also taking your own life usually isn't the best either. Regardless of why this place is haunted though, it definitely is. The disembodied voice of this woman is heard frequently, and it often manifests itself in this shrieking scream cry that's very unsettling for all of those who listen. Some have seen her apparition appear before them, but apparently this is a pretty rare occurrence. Number 4 on this list is the Madrid Sanatorium. As with most countries, there is a sanatorium that makes the list as being one of the most haunted. It just so happens to be one of the locations that sees the most tragedies in the world, and therefore often has a clumping of dark spirits and energy. Idealista says, this sanatorium in the region of Madrid was built in 1941 to treat some of the most serious diseases that were plaguing the civilian population back then. These diseases were tuberculosis, leprosy, polio, fibrosis, and lung cancer. It was eventually converted into a psychiatric hospital, and in 1995, it closed its doors once and for all. Until not long ago, it was possible to go inside and visitors could find the records and personal objects of former patients. Those who have been there speak of mysterious presences in the corridors, electrical devices that strangely stop working for no reason, and doors that suddenly close violently. Many people also claim to have seen lights in the immensity of plants that resemble lanterns walking around. I mean, it really is no wonder why this place is haunted, guys. We went from a sanatorium to a psychiatric hospital, and it's clear that both places saw a lot of death in their time. It should also be noted that psychiatric hospitals back in the day were not nearly as good as they are now. People were very often mistreated at these places, and it's not common to see those spirits linger on. There truly is no reason for you to be traveling to this place other than to test your luck with the ghosts, something that I really don't recommend doing.
Coming in at number 3, we have the Skull Tower. This stone structure is located in Nis, Serbia, and almost 1,000 human skulls are embedded in the walls. Constructed by the Ottoman Empire in 1809 following the Battle of Zagar during the First Serbian Uprising. During the battle, Serbian rebels under the command of Stephen Sindelik were surrounded by the Ottomans on Siga Hill near Nis. Knowing that he and his fighters would be killed if they were captured, Stephen detonated a powder magazine within the rebel entrenchment, killing not only himself but also his fighters and the Ottoman soldiers. After this massacre, the governor of the Rumelia Eyalet, Hushid Pasha, ordered that a tower be made from the skulls of the fallen. The tower is 15 feet high and consisted of 952 skulls embedded on 4 sides in 14 rows. So many lives were lost at the Skull Tower, and the history and skulls displayed are proof of that. And many believe that these lost souls still roam the area and is considered to be a very haunted attraction in Siberia. In 1861, Midhat Pasha, the last Ottoman governor of Nis, ordered that the Skull Tower be dismantled, but that did not happen. It was eventually restored and the chapel was renovated in 1937. In 1948, Skull Tower and the chapel enclosing it were declared cultural monuments of exceptional importance and came under protection of the Socialist Republic of Serbia, and further renovation of the chapel occurred in 1989. Many Serbians see this display as a symbol of the country's struggle for independence. As of this year, only 58 skulls remain in the tower walls, and Sindelik's skull is said to be featured in an enclosed glass container next to the structure. The Skull Tower is a very popular tourist attraction, visited by 30,000 to 50,000 people annually to see this eerie and creepy display. Coming in at number 2, we have Mount Rattan. This is a mountain located in eastern Serbia between the towns of Boljevac and Sokobanja, and is one of the highest peaks in Serbia and is another huge phenomenon. Many stories have emerged from onlookers and tourists that go to Rattan. Stories about unusual flying objects which circle around the peak, fiery spheres, aliens and voices in unknown languages have been some of many things people experience here. This mountain is also talked about by many due to its beauty, size and perfect geometrical shape resembling a pyramid. Rattan actually has the same angle of inclination as the Pyramid of the Moon in Mexico, and same angles as the Pyramid of Cheops, and many believe that this is not coincidence. The mystery surrounding Rattan is still the reason for many scientists' arguments. Some say the mountain is actually an ancient pyramid, a natural wonder, the work of a higher power of even aliens. Another local legend explains that the castle of a wizard was located on Rattan Mountain, where he held his treasure, but the castle had eventually disappeared within the mountain, trapping the wealthy sorcerer inside with his treasures, making this a very popular location for treasure hunters in search for lost gold and gems. So many questions loom over Mount Rattan and has created a whirlwind of theories and tourists to come and try and experience the many things rumored to happen here. Others come to Rattan for the rare healing herbs that grow in the mountains, and it emits a type of energy which is beneficial to human health, but this is only a rumor. Everyone who has visited this mountain say they experience a mysterious energy. We may never know if this is positive or negative. And finally, in at number 1, we have Sava Savanovic's Mill. This is one of the most well-known places in Serbia for its ghost stories. This mill is located in the hill of the small village of Saroj in the west-central part of Serbia, 3 hours away from the town of Belgrade. The story is that Sava Savanic was a vampire and the first ever vampire that resided resided at this mill. According to one story, Sava was a wealthy cattle trader and he had fallen in love with a much younger girl who he had proposed to, but she had rejected him. Blinded by anger and jealousy, he decided to kill the girl. After the locals of Saroj found out, they beat Sava to death and buried him outside the local cemetery. But actually, Sava had risen and became a vampire and began drowning everyone who would come to grind grain in his mill. For years, the locals of Saroj lived in fear of the murderous vampire until they came together and stabbed him with a hawthorn skate, killing him forever. And legend says that a butterfly escaped from Sava's grave, which meant that Sava is still visiting the mill to this day. The citizens of the village tell many stories about the horror they have faced from this creature, and it's the most known horror story throughout all of Serbia. And in 1880, one of the most famous Serbian authors, Milovan Glisic, wrote the book 90 years later, rooting from the story of this famous vampire, and was in fact published 17 years before Bram Stoker's Dracula. And then in 1973, all of the stories of the vampire were turned into Serbia's first horror film, Butterfly. The old Sava mill was left abandoned for a long time until it was renovated by the local owner of the village cafeteria, and after all of these stories swirling, Sava has become a local legend, and tourists come from near and far to visit this mill. Many still believe that Sava to this day still haunts the mill, and it's considered one of the most haunted places in all of Serbia.
Number 5 on this list is the Chateau de Camargue. The Chateau de Camargue is located in Périgord, an ancient region of France. The chateau isn't as beautiful as it once was, some of its former glory lost to time and also to war. This chateau was a critical point of interest in the 100 Years' War between France and Britain. It was the host to one of the more brutal fights that the war ever saw and was eventually captured by the British. As was typical back then, when you captured a place, many of the people that were running that place were either captured or put to death. One person of interest was put to death by being beheaded, and that was the young lover of the daughter of the Earl of Camargue. It's said that this man was deeply in love with the daughter and that she was in love with him as well. His beheading didn't seem like a major point of interest to the British at the time, but it actually left a bit of a spirit behind. What's really interesting about this story though is that it wasn't the spirit of this young man that was left behind, it also wasn't the spirit of the young daughter or even the Earl of Camargue himself. In fact, it was the spirit of this young man's horse. The horse that this young man rode into battle with to attempt to defend the chateau, and the horse that he had his whole life. Its ghost has yet to pass on. It's said that the ghost of this horse wanders the grounds of the chateau searching for its master. People who have ventured into the castle have reported hearing the clicking of hooves and a deep groan from a horse. People have also reported seeing this dead horse's ghost walking around the grounds of the chateau as if it was defending it from potential invaders like it did in the past. It's suggested that if you do intend to visit this chateau, that you don't bring any negative energy with you. The horse could potentially interpret this as a threat and come after you. Some have even suggested bringing a carrot or an apple and leaving it at the front of the chateau as a sign of good faith towards this ghostly steed. Number 4 on this list is the Palace de Tuli. The Palace de Tuli is home to one of France's most known ghosts who has been nicknamed the Red Man. The Red Man has been around for several hundred years and has 2 potential stories of origin. The first story talks about a man nicknamed Jack the Skinner worked for Catherine de Medici after her husband Henry II died. He worked as a hitman for her and would be sent to murder potential political foes. He was exceptional at his work, but eventually there grew a time where the Queen was worried that he knew too much about her. After all, he knew exactly how many people she had had executed considering he had done the executing. To make sure her secrets were safe, she had another man murder him. He killed him in the garden, which I should note is typically the area linked to this haunting, and then he left his body in said garden. When he came back to fetch the corpse, it was missing. Then, the Queen's astrologist told her that he foretold some great disaster happening to the people of Tuileries and that John would be at the forefront of it. Since then, whenever the Red Man appears, it's said that a tragic event will happen to the people surrounding his appearance. The second origin story is that when this palace was built, the Red Man was already there. This ghost spoke to Catherine de Medici and foretold her death, and even though she forsook him and the palace that she had built, the prediction he had made turned out to eventually be true. Pierre-Jean de Béranger, a famous French poet, describes the Red Man as being a small man clothed from top to toe in scarlet, whose eye is so piercing and unearthly that it terrifies the most courageous. He never speaks, nor are his visits of much length.
he vanishes soon after his presence is discovered. This has been echoed throughout time as many French nobles have received visits from the Red Man before. Henry IV, Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette have all had visits from him in the past. There's even a story talking about how the Red Man appeared in front of Napoleon right before his death. There are tons of beautiful palaces in France, and if it was me, I'd avoid this one and go to one of them. Better to be safe than sorry when we're dealing with a devil-like demon whose presence means impending doom.
Number 3 on this list is Oate. Oate is actually an entire village, and it's said that the whole village is haunted. This village is abandoned now, and maybe a big reason for that is because of how haunted it is. Don Quixote says why this village started to empty at the end of the 19th century is still not entirely clear, but illness, unfortunate weather, and a murder all had a role to play. During this time there was sickness, especially the Spanish flu, which devastated the area, and rain and hail that destroyed crops in successive years during the 1920s caused people to go search for a better place to live. In 1930 there remained only 2 families, one being a family of 3 and the other a single elderly man. Because a crazy pastor that frequented the village threatened pretty much everyone, the Aranguiz family decided to move to a safer village nearby. The elderly man, Eusebio, wasn't far behind. Their fears were later realized when the crazed shepherd brutally killed a fellow shepherd in one of the abandoned houses in Oate in 1936. All of this has obviously left its mark on this abandoned village, and now it's just a mess of ghostly and paranormal activity. A hotspot of spirits, demons, and beasts. In fact, and this is almost something else entirely, but there have been literal sightings of UFOs here before. That's a lot of stuff for one tiny village in Spain. I would recommend doing exactly how the locals did and avoiding this village at all costs. Number 2 on this list is the Thorax Hospital. The Thorax Hospital has definitely seen some horrible things over the years. The hospital, which is now abandoned and out of use, is located in Teresa. Back in its heyday, it was mainly used as a hospital for those sick with respiratory illnesses. All of the diseases varied, but if it had to do with your lungs, then it was likely that you ended up here. The hospital sadly boasted a very horrible statistic when it was operational. It seemed that an uncanny amount of individuals would take their own life if they got sent here. Many believe that due to the nature of the diseases that we're referring to, many people died a slow and painful death. This process often induced a sort of psychosis where the individuals would start to lose their mind a little bit before dying. Logical thought was very hard for these individuals to grasp, and even though it was a house of the sickly, it also turned into a house for the mad. This is why a lot of these individuals would take their own life. One of the biggest legends surrounding this spot is the jungle. Apparently, there is a garden in the middle of this hospital. Patients would go up to the 9th floor and they would either be thrown off or jump themselves to what was called the jungle down below, or the garden. Obviously, the 9-story fall was too much for their bodies to take and they would die. That's why people believe this garden to be the most haunted of all the spots in this hospital. A very dark and somber place in Spain that shouldn't be gone to. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Malaga tunnels. Malaga is a beautiful province in Spain by the water. It's a very popular tourist attraction spot that has some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. Underneath the fun in the sun, there are some deeply haunted tunnels though. Cycling Country writes, tied to a grisly chapter in Malaga's history when for 30 years a spate of young girls went missing in the area, some of their bodies were found near a river quite close to the Cortajo. Rumors soon abounded that underneath the building existed tunnels and torture chambers where these unfortunate women met their fate and with satanic rituals being performed. It also was a hospital and prison during the Bloody Civil War and quite possibly saw some executions and a lot of torment. The truth is, the tunnels did exist but have now been bricked up. The rest, well, you'll have to make up on your own mind whether this qualifies as one of the most haunted places in Spain. However, passing by this abandoned place sure is creepy. Disembodied voices, screams, lights, a sudden grip by a cold hand, and Appearances in upstairs windows of people all add to the strangeness of this spot and have been witnessed by researchers in the paranormal fields. Unfortunately, this notoriety has caused a lot of damage to the thrill seekers trying to literally unearth the building's secrets. To add fire to these myths, in 2000 a film was made there using it as a backdrop. However, accidents, faulty sound, and battery problems plagued the production and it was never finished. For me, this is definitely one of the most haunted places in Spain. We're talking about torture chambers, satanic rituals, murder. This is a horrible place that has seen way too many tragedies and horrors to be anything but a haunted location. If you go to Malaga, stick to the fun and the sun and stay away from the tunnels and this haunted building. Going down there may just be the last thing that you do.
In at number 5 we have Ghost Castle. In the town of Bios in Serbia on the slopes of Fruškogora mountains rests an abandoned building in ruins and long forgotten. Known originally as the Spitzer Castle, it was once one of the most beautiful sights in all of Serbia, with glass gardens, peacocks and deer, somewhere you would only hear about in a fairy tale. It was built in the late 19th century by Edward Eddie Spitzer, who was the co-owner of the Biocin cement factory. Spitzer hired the famous architect Imre Stindl, best known for his work on the Hungarian Parliament building in Budapest. The architectural styles of Spitzer Castle include elements of Gothic, Renaissance, Baroque and Romanesque art. In 1889 the mansion had been finished and the Spitzer family moved into the castle and lived there until World War II, then leaving in 1941 and moving to Germany. After the war, the ownership of the castle went to the state, and then at various points in time it hosted a school, library, the first Biocin radio station and a restaurant, but as time went on the building was slowly deteriorating. It was also used as a film set for many movies, including the 1970 American war film Kelly's Heroes starring Clint Eastwood. Today the castle is deserted, surrounded by wires, without door or windows and crumbling rooftops. The locals had nicknamed the building as the Ghost House due to many people hearing, seeing and coming into contact with paranormal entities. On more than one account, people hear footsteps and screams coming from one of the bedrooms. This creepy, decaying building is scary enough, but many dark tourism enthusiasts come here to see if they too can come into contact with any ghosts and haunted beings. There is a theory from the locals that a boy was roaming the home with his friends, but had gone off on his own and never returned. The boy's friends said they heard screams, and when they had run over to the area, it was coming from nothing. They had searched in and around the building, but the boy was never found, and to this day people still hear his screams. This is one place you should never visit because you may never come back. Coming in at number 4 we have Devil's Town. Devolja Veros, which translates to English as Devil's Town, is a very unusual rock formation said to be created by soul erosion. These peculiar rock towers are located between the Devil's Gully and Hell's Gully near the town of Kuršumlija in southern Serbia. Located on Mount Rattan are more than 200 stone formations, 2 to 15 meters high and up to 3 meters wide, with strange stone caps. This particular place is a huge tourist destination, not only because of its beautiful and unique looking rock towers, but also because of the legend surrounding this eerie place. Locals believe that these weird looking rock formations are actually petrified remains of a cursed wedding party. Apparently these poor people drank from a nearby spring, which attracted the devil himself, who tried to cloud their minds and force a brother and sister into marriage. Once the word got to a local fairy, she decided to interfere and turn them all into stone. The locals still insist that the area is haunted by the devil and refuse to spend a night there. If you're brave enough to go to this cursed place, all I have to say is don't overstay your welcome. Devil's Town and their odd looking rock towers continue to be a very rare natural phenomenon, and was actually a nominee in the new 7 Wonders of Nature campaign. Definitely one of the most visited places in Serbia, whether it's because of its beauty or its haunted past. It's unknown its true origins, but it's definitely a very creepy place. If you're still willing to travel and see this place, maybe just leave before the sun sets, just in case.
Number 3 on this list is Malavenspitz House. Now that is super hard to say, so for the remainder of this entry I'm going to refer to this as the Vienna Prison. This place was put out of commission a long time ago, several hundred years ago in fact. There is a new building there now, but it's still haunted with the same ghosts that riddled this prison several hundred years ago. The prison was known for something truly horrible: torture. Apparently presumed criminals would be taken into the basement of this prison and brutally tortured in this spot. This torture was so horrible though that those that were kept here here would sometimes take their own life prior to this treatment. The souls of those that were tortured and the souls of those that killed themselves are the ones that haunt this place to this day. Blood-curdling screams have been heard throughout this entire building. People have also reported feeling attacked by spirits here, like they're ripping at their own soul and tearing them apart. Just because you destroyed the initial building that caused these atrocities to occur doesn't always mean that the ghosts of those that were hurt will automatically move on. This is exactly what happened here, and it's why you guys should never go. Number 2 on this list is Friedhof der Namenlosen. This place is a cemetery, and it's been nicknamed the Cemetery of the Nameless. Amy Script details the history of this place beautifully by writing, throughout the 1800s, the Danube River, which cuts through Austria, was often littered with bodies. These were usually drowning victims, those who had committed suicide, and often cause of death was unknown. Once the river had claimed these lives, it would carry the lifeless bodies of its victims ashore, hence dumping them in the same area. As even more bodies accumulated, respectful locals sought out solutions to offer them peace. The Cemetery of the Nameless was erected to offer these unidentified nameless people a place to rest, because they could not be interred at any of the Catholic cemeteries in Vienna, probably as many of the victims were of suicide. Bodies were routinely collected and interred at the cemetery, sporting markers listing them as nameless people. Almost 500 people were interred at the original cemetery, which was eventually abandoned. Today, a more modern and smaller segment of the cemetery continues to stand. This burial plot holds the remains of 104 people. Of those buried in the cemetery, 61 remain nameless, whereas others were identified by family or friends. Because of this dark history, this place has been labeled as one of the most haunted cemeteries in the entire world. Disembodied voices coming from these nameless dead can be heard constantly throughout this cemetery. It's believed that the nameless can never truly rest until their identity is revealed. Their souls will never find peace until the world knows who they really were. Apparently, the former caretaker of this cemetery haunts this space as well, and he'll often appear to the visitors. Those that go here have felt like some sort of entity is also pulling at them. Not physically, but as if their souls are being pulled in multiple directions, as if somebody needs your help. This cemetery is definitely on the do not go list if you ever find yourself in Austria. And finally, number 1 on this list is Musham Castle. Musham Castle isn't just one of the most haunted spots in Austria or in Europe, it's right up there as being one of the most haunted spots in the world. Ghosts of soldiers, witch trials, werewolves, torturous owners, all of this has happened in the walls of this castle. Starting with the first thing on that list, ghosts of soldiers, there have apparently been over 45 battles that have taken place at this location. It's been said that the ground was soaked with blood during these fights, and they were as gruesome as anything the world had seen to that point. Then, moving on to the witch trials, this place has seen some witches die. In the late 1600s, tons of accused witches were killed here in gruesome ways. Those that weren't murdered had their hands chopped off or were burned with iron, indicating to the world that they were criminals. The rumors of werewolves didn't start until the 1800s, when animals started disappearing from around the area. Then their bodies would start showing up decapitated around the castle, and had the locals living close to the castle believe in a deadly werewolf. Then there were also the rumors that came out about a vicious owner of this castle who would take people inside and torture them before killing them. This was proven when a torture chamber was found in the castle. Obviously, all of this has made the castle one of the most haunted spots in the world. People have said that they get the sensation of hands reaching out and grabbing them from thin air while they're at this castle. Some people have even gone mad after going to this place, saying that it feels like a parasite has entered into their brain. The werewolf has also never been found, and some of the locals believe that it still haunts this place to this day. This castle cannot be visited in any circumstance. It's certainly interesting to research, but visiting it is way too much of a risk.
In at number 5, we have Berlin's Citadel. The Citadel was built in 1559 and is known as one of the best preserved military structures in Europe. It was originally built to protect Spandau from attack, built specifically to have no blind spots, giving an advantage on all sides in the event of an attack. The Citadel has seen a lot of destruction and war since it was built, but the most famous ghost to live there is the spirit of Anna Sido. Anna was married but had a love affair with Joachim II, the local ruler at the time. As the ruler was dying, he asked his son to take care of Anna. The affair had been frowned upon, but as both of their parents had passed, they had grown closer before he got sick. When he passed, his son didn't keep his promise. He immediately imprisoned her in the Citadel. No one ever saw Anna again after that. There was no explanation as to where she had gone or if she had been punished for her love affair with the ruler. There had been reports from visitors of the White Lady, a ghost seen walking around the Citadel late at night. Some felt a sudden cold breeze and feeling of dread while walking around the grounds, but still there was no explanation. Years later, the Citadel was a big tourist attraction and renovations took place. While they began to renovate, they found the remains of Anna. She had been walled into a cell and left there. This seemed to confirm the rumors that she was the White Lady for all these years. Some people have seen her late at night, but others have felt her presence. Even after she was found, her spirit had remained. If you visited today, you might catch a glimpse of her if you were to be there after nightfall. Coming in at number 4, we have Swiftkov Castle. The origin of Swiftkov goes back to the prehistoric times. A fort was built there in the 1st century AD. It sits on the edge of a lake covered in all sides by water, making it the perfect place if you're worried about intruders. The castle was built in the early 13th century by King Oate. It is not known when it was built, but the first written mention of the castle was in 1234, when it was owned by the King of Bohemia. It had many owners throughout the years, being seized in wars and passed to new rulers. It is now owned by the National Heritage Institute and is open to guests. It is regarded by locals as the creepiest place in Germany. Many refuse to visit or leave before it gets dark, as not to disturb the spirits they believe to live there. They believe that the castle is home to a dark supernatural entity. They believe it had been since prehistoric times and has never left the land. There are often voices heard from around the castle. Technical faults happen, often with no explanation. It's also been said many animals refuse to go into the building and act strange on the land outside the castle. There have been many times where the staff had lit candles to light up the halls when night falls. There have been times when every candle had been blown out at once, sending chills down the spines of anyone in the area. The most haunted part of the castle is the main tower. There are reports that if you sleep in the tower, you will pass away within the year. There are at least 2 confirmed cases of this happening throughout the castle's history.
Number 3 on this list is the Rue de Chantre. This is considered by most to be the most haunted streets in France. It's located in Paris on the island and is right next to the Notre Dame Cathedral. This street is said to be haunted by the ghosts of many children. As with most ghost stories, this didn't come out of thin air, but from a horrible tragedy that took place on this street just over 100 years ago. In the early 1900s, there was a hotel that was located on this street. This hotel didn't really act as a hotel though, because during that time there was a massive outbreak of tuberculosis. The children in the area who had come down with the disease were sent to this hotel to quarantine. They were locked in the bedrooms of this hotel and couldn't leave at any point for risk of infecting other people. Some children died during these quarantines, which is already bad, but the main tragedy happened roughly a decade later in 1910. In 1910, there was a great flood of Paris where the River Seine overflowed and flooded the city. All the children that were currently locked inside their bedrooms at this time drowned during that flood. Nobody knows for sure the exact number of children who died in this tragedy, but it was certainly enough to make a spiritual imprint on the street. Now their souls go without rest and live along the street. People have heard the laughter and also the crying of children. They have heard the muffled screams as if they're screaming through water. They've also seen these children before, peering out at them from around corners, looking extremely sad and lonely. The spot acts as an attraction for supernatural hunters, but a landmark that I wouldn't recommend visiting. Number 2 on this list is Mont Saint-Michel. Mont Saint-Michel is one of the most beautiful and unique castles on the entire planet, in my opinion. How it's constructed and where it's located, it almost doesn't even seem like something out of real life. This castle is located off of the Normandy coast, and the only connection that it has to France is a road that goes underwater when it's high tide. How this place got made has a bit of a supernatural story to it. Apparently, the archangel Michael appeared to Saint Aubert in a dream and told him to start building here. When he resisted, Michael burned a hole right in his head. After this incident, the castle began its construction, and it took quite a while to become the beauty that we have today. It was a work in progress, with more things being added over the years. Now, because of this castle's location directly in the water, it is extremely hard to attack and was never captured during the 100 Years' War. During said war, one of the major commanders of this castle was Louis d'Estourville. His ghost is one of the most common sightings at this place. He apparently is responsible for the killing of thousands of English soldiers and had battles that were so deadly the water around them would turn red with blood. He's said to patrol the castle and act as a watchman of sorts for intruders and people posing a threat. Similar to our previous entry of the horse, one of his main objectives is to keep the castle safe. He isn't the only ghost at this spot though. The ghosts of monks can also be seen praying and meditating at this location. For a long time, this castle housed several hundred monks until they were ultimately kicked out from the space. Their spirits still linger in this place though, although they aren't nearly as frightening as the weathered war general, in my opinion. Number 1 on this list is the Paris Catacombs. The Paris Catacombs is unlike anything else on the entire planet and is the breeding ground for scary stories. These catacombs are a collection of tunnels that are underneath the city of Paris and stretch for over 2,000 acres. The tunnels act as an underground cemetery where they house over 6 million dead bodies. This is one of the largest collections of the dead in the entire world, and if that wasn't enough, you can actually see their skulls as they all line the walls. These catacombs are extremely difficult to navigate. Seeing as there are over 2,000 acres of them and it's underground, people have reported getting extremely lost when they're trying to explore them. This is part of the reason why only a portion of them are open to the public today. But all of this has led to a plethora of ghost stories and legends over the years. For instance, in 2004, a group of police officers were investigating an area of the catacombs that was closed to the public and they came upon something unexpected. A bar, a living room, a workshop, and a meeting area for over 20 people, they were all found. This was alongside a PA system, a camera system recording the area, and a pirated means of electricity. All of this was more than suspicious, but when the officers returned a few days later with some more people, everything was gone, except for a note that read, "Don't search." This isn't all there is to the catacombs though. In the 1990s, a group was searching through them and found a video camera lying on the ground. They picked it up and examined it and saw that there was a recording. The recording was clearly of a man who was very lost in the catacombs and extremely frantic. Scary voices could be heard in the background, and the heavy breathing of this man indicated his panic. Finally, the camera fell to the ground and we could hear the man scream. These are just 2 of the more famous stories to come from these catacombs, but so many other ones of ghosts or demons haunting the area have come from this place. If you were to ever go here, then make sure you have a strong sense of direction and a flashlight, because the last thing you would want is to get lost in an underground haunted graveyard.
In at number 5 we have Develli's Cave. Develli's Cave is one of the most famous and well-known haunted caves in the world, and tourists and locals visit often to try and come in contact with the paranormal spirits that haunt the cave. It's located in Penteli, a mountain to the north of Athens, Greece, and has been around since the 5th century. Back then it was used as a marble quarry by the builders of the Acropolis, and the cave was actually discovered by accident during work for the extraction of marble. During the Middle Ages it was used by Orthodox Christian hermits, and later on a small church was built at the entrance of the cave, featuring an unusual double layout, one part devoted to Saint Spiridon and one to Saint Nicholas. It was used as a place of worship for the followers of Pan and the nymphs. It is also believed to have been, and still could possibly be, used by other religious groups, mainly occultists. The cave got its name from a belief that an infamous 19th century thief and robber named Develli used the cave as a hideout, and legend has it that he hid his treasures inside the cave, and over the years many people have come to try and find his fortune. Many times throughout history the cave has been used as a shelter for civilians, and in 1977 construction work started on the cave, and it's unclear who was behind it. Many believe it might have been the works of the government wanting to use the cave and surrounding areas for the US and Greek army. The cave has been associated with various paranormal activity and ghost sightings since the ancient times, this being the main reason it's being used for a place of worship. The mystical character of the cave continues to fascinate people to this day, and dozens of urban legends are connected to the cave. There are numerous tales of people experiencing strange and abnormal activity that has taken place in and around the cave. Stories tell of electronics that stop working, water flowing the wrong way, and disappearances of explorers who enter the cave to never emerge again. Also, details such as a small handprint near the entrance furthers the mystery of this place. In at number 4, the Necromanteion. The Necromanteion was an ancient Greek temple built and dedicated to the god and goddess of the underworld. The Necromanteion was an ancient Greek temple built and dedicated to the god and goddess of the underworld, Hades and Persephone. According to tradition, it was located on the banks of Acheron River in Epirus, near the ancient city of Ephria. This site was believed to be the door to Hades, the realm of the dead. The word Necromanteion means oracle of the dead, and the faithful came here to talk to their dead ancestors. Other temples were known to house oracles of the dead, but the Necromanteion of Ephria was was the most important. It belonged to the Thesprotians, the local Epirot Greek tribe, and they would participate in rituals involving elaborate ceremonies where they would seek to speak to the dead. The people would eat specific foods like pork, bread, and oysters, said to cleanse the body, and would proceed to sacrifice a sheep, and the faithful would descend through a series of meandering corridors, leaving offerings to the people as they passed through the iron gates. The celebrants would then witness the priest arise from the floor and fly throughout the temple, said to be possessed by the souls of the dead. The Necromanteion was also described as the entrance by which Odysseus made his Nekia, which is the ancient Greek cult practice and is a rite by which ghosts were called up by the Greeks and questioned about the future. This temple was believed by many to be the final resting spot. Once they passed on and their bodies decayed into the earth, their spirits were released, and the Necromanteion was the final resting place for the dead. Many locals and tourists come to try and communicate with the dead. There is an abundance of paranormal activity in this place, and it is known as an entryway to the underworld and is one of the only direct channels on Earth for the souls of the underworld to come and communicate with humans. Coming in at number 3, Osnar Brook. Osnar Brook was once the site in a major pagan temple and burial area. The pagans decided that they would attempt to convert the German people to the Christian faith. This led to a massacre taking place at the temple. The local forces took the lives of those there, including the priests. They then desecrated the graves and broke their altar stones. The pagans built their temples and buried the dead on sacred land. It is believed that this act disturbed the deep magic infused in the land. Now, every year during the winter solstice and summer equinox, something strange happens on the land. Strange orbs of light have been seen moving around the area. Screams are heard from miles away. Stains appear on the stones that still lay there today. Although the town have now been built away from the graveyard, you can still visit today. Many locals avoid the land as the spirits there seem angry about what happened to their descendants. It is thought these spirits wield great power and could have revenge when and if they choose to. If you do choose to visit, you need to be warned to be respectful. Do your research before and careful when you arrive. Many have reported seeing terrifying things or feelings like being watched while there. No one visits during the solstice and equinox, as this is when the spirits are the most active. Coming in at number 2, we have Peacock Island. Peacock Island is situated in the River Havel in Berlin. In 1685, chemist Johann Kuhnel was given financial aid to build a glass foundry on the east of the island. Here he discovered how to produce artificial red glass. When he left the island in 1692, it remained unused for about 100 years until 1793. In 1793, the Prussian King Frederick built the castle for himself and his mistress. This was then passed down through the family and used for many different reasons, including being used as an exotic farm. Although the island has a long and exciting history, there are claims it is the original Johann Kuhnel who inhabits the island long after her death. It is claimed that Johann was not only into creating glass, but that he experimented with dark magic. It is believed that through his experiments with black magic, he had cursed himself. He attempted to flee the island as to not be attached to the curse, but this didn't work. In the afterlife, he was bound to the land and his old foundry. Those who have visited the island have seen a black figure with glowing red eyes. He is often seen at the stroke of midnight. When he is near, you can feel the chill in your bones. You know that you're in the presence of darkness just by being on the island during his hour. His laboratory still stands today, and some have tried to find his old lab to learn all the dark magic and secrets that he tried to hide. It is said a fire nearly destroyed the building. The police believe this to be man-made, and it's speculated he was trying to destroy the demons and spirits he had accidentally been working with in the lab. He couldn't escape the curse, and if you don't want to meet the same fate, I would avoid visiting this building. And finally, in at number 1, we have the Woldneil Hostert School. The school was first built in 1913 and then closed in 1937 when it was then used by the National Socialism Party. They wanted to use the building as part of their euthanasia program. They wanted to make their bloodlines pure and strong, and they had the idea to use the building to house anyone who was not seen as genetically healthy. All those with hereditary illnesses or who were severely mentally and physically handicapped were classified as lives unworthy of life. They would invite the people they deemed to fall into this category to live in the facility before they would eliminate them. According to data collected, more than 260,000 people fell victim to their war against sick. This was just one of many of these facilities run around Germany. With all of the horrible acts committed here, it is no surprise that it is haunted with the lost souls. The people lost here were taken suddenly, and their spirits remain unable to pass on. Some people who have visited reporting hearing blood-curdling cries coming up the walls in every direction. Others have seen shadows darting from room to room as though they are watching those who walk there. Other ghosts have been seen looking through the windows or sitting inside the rooms late at night. They don't seem to have bad intentions, but they seem to be distraught, which can be equally as dangerous if you were to stumble across them unknowingly. Some even claim to see children who have disappeared as soon as they were noticed. The stories from those who have visited are terrifying and chilling to hear. It is enough to warn anyone away from attempting to visit the old school.